Well, for the past 12 weeks, we've dug deep into the riches of the Bible, and we saw connections that were made with the book 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. And one of the things that happened is we discovered that there are two key themes that are woven through the Bible, and they're also woven through the 12 rules. It's in the Bible, we call these themes dying and rising, or death and resurrection, if you will. These are biblical themes throughout. In other words, in order for the growth to occur, in order for people to expand who they are, there's going to be suffering, and there's going to be pain, and there's going to be hardship along the way. And these call out of us our best true selves, that which God has placed within us. And so certainly the Christian faith, our whole faith is centered around the cross. And so, of all the signs, what a sign of suffering and the sign of loss and death. And yet, through that cross, Jesus is raised from the dead and lives now. And his resurrection power is available to all of us. So, death and resurrection. And then we hear these words that were just read, that our bodies are dying. We're wearing out. You might not realize that when you're in, I don't know, who's the perfect age? Adam. It's a senior in high school. That'll be good. Physically, his body's probably as good as it's going to get. Okay? So if those of you who are in high school, enjoy yourselves. It's as good as it's going to get. Okay? And then we just slowly fade from there. We slowly wear out. But no, the thing that's so interesting that for Paul, it's just such a truth. It's that our bodies, as we get older, our bodies wear out. And Paul says our bodies are dying, they're wearing out, they're getting weaker and so forth. But then he says our spirits are growing. Well, because we are spiritual beings who just happen to be experiencing life temporarily now through a human body. It's the spiritual being part that lasts forever, and that's who we are. And so, the best years of our lives, the way God designs it, are to be what others will call the twilight years. Call those years of what we fondly refer to as aging. And isn't it interesting? We're designed to be at our peak as we get into our 70s and our 80s and our 90s and for some even your hundreds. Isn't that something? That's when we're at our peak as a human being, because we're spiritual beings who are temporarily existing and experiencing life through this body. It gives you a whole different perspective, because in this way we realize that we are constantly growing, and that there is no such thing as the status quo. There's no settling. There's only expanding. Now, Jordan Peterson expresses these same themes in the language of suffering and the language of aiming high. We've used his teaching as a framework to explore what it means for us, in spite of our suffering, to aim high, to move forward in life, to take those tiny steps where things are a little better today than they were yesterday. Or at the very least, we are a little less horrible today than we were yesterday. We don't have to seek out suffering. Suffering finds us, and it will come our way, and either we will be in the middle of a deep physical or emotional or spiritual pain. Either we will be at any moment or at any time, or someone we love will be. We don't get away from that suffering and that pain, no matter who we are, no matter how much money we have, no matter how healthy we continue to try to be. It's going to be there. If not for us, then someone we love. Now, why is that? I mean, God is the creator, and he's amazing. He's all-powerful, all-knowing, all everything. So how come we have a world that has suffering and pain and loss? It seems that even when things are going relatively well in our lives, something else will come along and challenge us very soon. And it will challenge us big time. And it isn't a matter of will the trouble come our way, but when will the trouble come? And this time, what's it going to be like? So how come God has a world like that? Well, a world like that because that's our existence. Our existence means we have limitation. If there were no limitation, we wouldn't really exist when you think about it. In fact, in 12 Rules for Life, in the 12th rule, and I'll explain eventually, pet a cat. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. It's a profound statement, but I'm not going to explain it yet. But I will say that in this 12th rule, Peterson talks about how we embrace life, how we come to life, and more than anything else, we recognize there's challenges. We recognize there's grief. All right, so this theme of suffering and this theme of pain and loss, in spite of this, how do we go on? Well, because we're truly alive. God honors our existence so much that He lets us experience what He experiences. God creates us in order to become more and more like Him. That's one of the great meanings of being created in the image of God. God is a non-spiritual entity, a non-spiritual being, a non-physical entity, a non-physical being, and so we can't see Him. So we know that when He says created in the image, it's not like we look like God, like in our actual physical image. No, it's more like in the midst of struggle and in pain and loss. Even God, our Creator, has one thing that He places upon Himself: limitation. Interesting? God places limitation on Himself. God says, in spite of everything you do, I can't help but love you. Aren't we glad for that limitation? But God says, I can't not love you. Isn't that something? In the negative, I can't not love you, He says. That's a good thing. And God limits Himself in the sense that He's not going to take every single step that we take and prepare something ahead of time so that step is exactly the step He wants us to take. That's not how God works. When we say that God has a plan for our lives, the plan for our lives is the same exact plan for everyone. That plan is we grow more and more to be like Him. And we grow more and more to be able to receive the power that He has in His kingdom now. That's the same exact plan for everyone. That's why somebody says, God has a plan for you. Well, He's got the same exact plan for everyone. See, the different one is the purpose. Okay? God gives you a purpose in His plan. He gives me a purpose, and that's to expand His kingdom. But that's going to look different depending on who we are. Because God creates each of us as a unique, individual human being. And so the roads that we travel together are roads also that we are experiencing alone. And by alone, I just simply mean through the resources that have come to be who I am, or who have come to be whom you are. And so that's why, more than anything, we see that the key of dying to yourself is becoming more and more living for the sake of others. It's through being transformed yourself, you become a transforming agent in the lives of others. And what Peterson called out these last 12 weeks, and what the Scripture's been calling out, is we take inventory constantly. This whole idea of death and resurrection, what it does is it leads us to explore ourselves. And what we find out is that pretty much we are the source of all of our problems. and also the solution. Isn't that interesting? That's what we discovered through Scripture. And Peterson lifted this up so well. You know what else lifted it up well? Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson, once he was drinking a glass of beer. He likes beer. And he was drinking a glass of beer, and he said these profound words. He said, alcohol, the cause of and the solution to all of life's problems. And I always think of that when Homer would say that, because that's what it's like for us in terms of life itself. I am the cause of. Now remember, when I'm saying cause, doesn't mean I made the thing happen, but it is this filter, it is the me filter that experienced what happened, no matter how horrible, and what I'm going to do about it. So the cause of all of my problems is me. The cause of all your problems is you, because it's the way you're facing those problems. I'm not saying you made them happen. There's a lot of things in life that are horrible that somebody does to us, or it's just it's nature itself. It's the tragedy of the natural world. You know, that has nothing to do with evil or badness or anything else. But the point is how do we respond to the things that come along that are challenging and that are painful and that cause us to suffer? So with rare exception, I'm the cause of and the solution to my problems. That's why I know that the whole existence of life is about limitation, because I have limitation. I come to every problem that I have, and I come to every opportunity I have with the same toolbox called me. I've got a set of tools. They have accumulated in me for my whole life, and even before I was born, those tools that I have were being developed, and they were being sharpened, and they were being honed by those who have gone before me. From my parents, most directly, to their parents, and so forth and so on. It's kind of interesting when you think about it, that you are such a miracle, because for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, there were people who lived and died, lived and died, lived and died. They passed along that same genetic code that made you. Is that wild? In other words, you should not be here. The statistical probability that of all of those people throughout the world, throughout the history of the world, that all of it kept going and going and going, and then it made you. Wow. So you are the accumulation of so many miracles of existence. You have your set of tools. I have mine. And so we live our lives becoming the kind of person God would have us be through the filter of ourselves. So it goes back to the rule where Peter says, I think it's 4, where he says, don't compare yourself to other people, who other people are today. Compare yourself to who you're going to be tomorrow. Okay? In other words, it's who you are. Compare yourself to who you were, not to who someone else is. Okay? And the idea there is we are becoming the kind of people that God can use. And that's why, I appreciate how Paul says it. He says, for our present troubles are small, they won't last very long. Well, he's taking an eternal picture. We're going to be living forever. We are living forever. Yet, they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So right now, you are the success story of all of creation, because you're here. And there's so many reasons why you shouldn't be here. Biological. Physiologically. You're sitting in a room with a bunch of people seeking the truth. Psychologically. You're sitting next to somebody that you love, who loves you, who wants the best for you. Spiritual. See, we are that accumulation. And what Paul is saying in the scripture, he's saying, never give up, because your weaknesses, your limitations, call out of you what's best, what God has in store. So you want what God wants for you. And that's the question. Do I want what God wants for me? Because if I do, then, as we've seen these last 12 weeks, a tremendous amount of sacrifice. We don't want to quickly say, yes, I want what God wants for me. Well, that means I'm going to be transforming into someone that I don't necessarily either want to be, or I don't want the transformation process. Sacrificing myself of what gets in the way of God. That's another way of putting it. Our lives are spent sacrificing those parts of us that get in the way of God, until there's an open channel, an open path for God to travel in, and to get to our very soul, and to lift it up and expand it forever. So sacrificing myself also means saying goodbye to many things that I've enjoyed over the years. You see, once you say, God, I want to be the person you want me to be, you're going to be getting rid of a lot of stuff that you find enjoyable. You know, people always say, God, if I become a Christian, I'm going to be boring, or in the old days it was health habits, I can't drink, I can't smoke, or it was I can't dance or something. It's like, it's never been that. It's way worse than that. It means things like sacrificing always being right. Oh, God. I hate the thought that I'm not right all the time. And my brain is trying to convince me I am right. Don't listen to the other person. And my brain really works well, and it gives me so many excuses and reasons why I am right. But the point is, being right isn't always right. In fact, for most of us, being right on something, I have to be right on this, ends up becoming something that's wrong. How can I lift up my life and the life of those around me? I'm constantly trying to argue or think what's right, who's right, or who's wrong. You know what else I have to give up? That's why I'm saying yes to God. God, I want to be who you want me to be. Oh, don't do it so fast. Because you know what you have to give up? Blaming others for your problems. I mean, my hunch is when I said I am the source of all of my problems, you were fine with me saying that. But when I said you are the source of all your problems, I bet you there was a few people that are going, what do you mean? It's not me. It's her. No, but we will never know who that her is. Or it's this thing, or it's that thing. No. How about the unusual high that we get? And it's not subtle. We get a huge, physiologically and psychologically, we get a huge boost when we're really resentful, when we're really angry. Our whole body kind of moves into a mode. It's like, yes. Resentment, anger, no. Gotta get it. We'll have to get rid of that. Can't have it anymore. What are we going to do? What am I going to do if I can't be mad at someone, or I can't blame someone? Or getting our own way. Getting in our own way die. And then getting our own way dies. Did you get that? It's kind of subtle. Let me do it again. Getting our own way die lets us die to getting our own way. This whole country would be transformed one person at a time if that was one practice. I mean, everything in Christianity could be boiled down to, how do I respond when I don't get my own way? And this whole country would be transformed if we responded to not getting our own way in the maturity and in the vision and hope of Christ. Did he get his own way? Hardly. He spent it from his birth all the way through. All he did was live a life where the world and sometimes evil people in the world were working against him. So here comes the pet the cat thing. How can I become the kind of person that can be transformed by God? Well, we've been talking about this for the whole 12 weeks. It's tiny, step by step by step, things you can do. And the way that we do that is we learn to narrow our time frame. Just shorten your time frame. In other words, you're going to be faced with horrible things. And some of those things are going to be looking at your own self and going, man, how the heck did I end up this way? And some of those things are going to be things that are happening to you that are outside of your control. But the point being made is, when we face some really terrible things, when we face some things that are going to be awful, again, if it's not going to be us, it's going to be our loved ones. Severe illness, pain, breakup in marriages, whatever it's going to be, we're going to hit those things. And whatever that is, as we face these things, the idea is make it a little tiny bit less tragic by doing your part to make it a tiny bit better. I love how Peterson put this, and I got to practice this because I've been studying Peterson for a few years now, and I got to put this in practice this spring. It was amazing because one of his strong teachings is be the kind of person who, at your father's funeral, others are going to look to for support and encouragement. And I thought to myself, man, the Hanson boys have gone through a lot in their lives and brought a lot of problems on themselves and had a lot of pain in their lives and everything else. And I thought the women who married us, they get a chance to share that same thing as we do with their parents, right? But the point I'm making here is that what a blessing to be connected to your brothers and your sisters in a way that there's so much grace and forgiveness and love and strength that you look to each other for support. And that was one of the coolest. I saw it with my mom when she died, and then I got to see it again with my dad, but I was watching my dad's death through the eyes of what Dr. Peterson has been talking about, and this idea of who are you at your father's funeral. And I saw how much support and that I could provide for my family, and also how much support my brothers provided for me and for my loved ones. And it was beautiful. And so you can become that kind of person when you let go of the angry resentment and bitterness and so forth that's so absolutely normal at a funeral. I mean, I've been to a few funerals, haven't I? Not only here, but throughout my life, being a funeral director's son. I've been to more funerals than anybody in this room, I guarantee you. And I'm going to tell you that everybody behaves. Oh no. You see some of the worst, most despicable behavior. And people say, well, there's a lot of stress and all that because so-and-so died. And it's like, whoa, it's time out. Our true character comes out during the worst stress. We're not good people. Automatically. But then another thing that happens is I've seen some of my best behavior I've ever seen at funerals. Isn't that interesting? I've seen families be so amazingly strong and supportive, and I've seen so much healing come. And sometimes I've seen when mom or dad dies in particular, that the whole that's the catalyst, that's the spark for a total change in someone else's life. And some of you are older than me, and you still have your parents. So I'm not saying that in this room that, only talking to generations younger than me. No, some of you are older than me, and your parents are still alive. Am I the kind of person that people are going to be able to rely on at my dad's funeral? And then there's another saying that Rich Melheim is fond of using, and he taught me. And he said, what do I want people to be talking about when they're leaving my gravesite? What do I want them to be talking about? What do I want them to be saying about me? We get the rest of our lives to make progress in that. Isn't that interesting? We get the rest of our lives to begin to think, what do I want people to be saying when they're leaving my grave? And so God has given us this blessing of today, this blessing of shortening our time frame and focusing on the here and focusing on the now, and making things a little less worse, making things a little better, making things a little more gentle, a little kinder, whatever it would take, the tiny little steps. And if everyone in this room would take those tiny little steps, it wouldn't just begin to transform Lifehouse, it would transform Northridge, it would transform the valley. I mean, think about it. You have so many connections to people. I have so many connections. Peterson said, do the math. He said, each of us has about 1,000 people who are acquaintances, who know us. 1,000 people, that's pretty much an average. I mean, I know with the internet and all that, and Facebook, it's probably a lot more now, but he said 1,000 people. So that means that if I know 1,000 people and I connect with you and you're 1,000 people, okay, how many people do I have? What's 1,000 times 1,000? Is Christina here? Oh, she's out with the baby. Some math teacher, give me 1,000 times 1,000. Is it 1,000,000? Okay, now, what's 1,000,000 times 1,000,000? That's 3 people. So you're basically 3 people removed from 1,000,000 times 1,000,000. That's a big number. Think about that. Just me and Mike, I'm looking at Mike because he's over here. Me and Mike, we know each other pretty well. Well, I know 1,000 people, he knows 1,000 people, so basically, there are 1,000,000 people somehow, somewhere, that are getting a tiny bit of what we've meant to each other. That interesting? All of a sudden you realize no person is just one person. So Peterson says, take a moment to cherish every moment that you have. He said it's not about thinking more, it's about noticing more. And so that's where he comes to the cat. He said, there are times, there are things that are just awful. And in this chapter, he talks about awful things that were happening to his kids. Horrible illness and disease and so forth. And he's saying every moment is the possibility of beauty. And he said there are times that if you just have a stray neighborhood, or your neighborhood cat come up to you and stand against your leg and rub against your leg, you get 30 seconds of relief, pure relief, the beauty of this creature. And I'm reading this and I'm going, man, I'm a dog lover. I don't like cats. And it's funny, Peterson spends the first 3 pages talking about dogs in this chapter because he knows everybody reading it who's a dog guy is going, cats. So he talks about it's about dogs and then cats. But the whole thing is the unexpected, the unusual, the beautiful. I mean, sometimes it's just, if you want to see something that no matter what you're going through, you want your heart to grow, just go shopping somewhere. And you'll get a child between maybe 3 and 6 or whatever, and watch how they instantly slip their hand into the hand of their mommy or their daddy. Or lucky grandpa or grandma, right? Just that little slipping their hand in. And you realize, wow, that's beautiful. That kid knows that they're being cared for. And to enjoy just noticing things that you don't normally notice. Because in the midst of that pain and that suffering and that struggle, it can be just those tiny little things that make all the difference. And we can do that in our own lives. Because we are not alone. We are created to be in family and created to be an extended family. And we can be there to encourage and support each other and to cheer each other on. And to let each other know, I'm struggling in our relationship right now. Something doesn't seem peaceful. Let's explore that together. But the hope of the world rests on this. That God's full love and full support is shown more than any other way by just making us as human beings and allowing us to experience what we experience, guiding us all the way as we let Him guide us. And how do I know that that's what His full support and love? Because that's what He did at Christmas. He became one of us. God solved all His problems and all His challenges. He solved them all by becoming a person, a human being. Not by trying to not be who you are, but by being your best true self who God is calling you out to be. Amen.